Hello, it's Fred and Sheila McCoy at the Hatfield McCoy Museum in Liberty, Kentucky, fredmccoy.com or hatfieldsmccoysmuseum.com. They both take you to the website, just different pages. Just go to the top and click on the page that you want. This is going to be another segment of Keeping It Real, where Sheila and I, maybe something we've seen,
Heard, was told,
watched on YouTube,
yeah.
TikTok, and it's incorrect, and we're here to correct it. Now, whether people wants to take our correction, that's up to them. Nobody has to believe anything we say. We try to use documentation and proof. Newspaper articles are not the best proof that you can use. We all know about fake news now, and they had it back in the 1800s too. So it's
That's okay. It's just
somebody wanted to come in the museum. We probably just lost a customer making a
Oops.
video, but anyway, so even though newspapers aren't that reliable always, there is some information in there that a person can maybe use. And the thing that I like to make a point, we're going to discuss the newspaper here in a minute, Time Magazine. And this article was wrote September 10th, 2019.
wow.
2019. So should we compare with what's said in 2019 to a newspaper that was written in 1882? Which one, even though there was yellow journalism, even though there was the newspapers wasn't always correct, which one would you rather believe? Something that was written within days of something occurring?
Mm-hmm.
Or something that somebody's writing nowadays? I'd rather believe what was written back then. And between what was written back then and family stories firsthand, well, probably secondhand, I guess, because it'd be my grandpa, and which, my great-grandfather was Preacher Ance Hatfield, and Preacher Ance knew a lot about the feud and what went on, and again, that was on his property where the election was held. That was across the street from his property where Ellison was stabbed. And that's what we're going to discuss today. This article here, Time Magazine, the causes of the Hatfield-McCoy feud ran deeper than you may think. Now this is Time Magazine, so one would think that, oh man, it's got to be correct. Well, if it was correct, it wouldn't be here on this segment of Keeping It Real. So we've got some kind of problem with it.
Oops.
And quote, it says, maybe Randolph was sore at the Hatfields for stealing a Razorback pig. Maybe he was angry because his daughter Roseanne had got pregnant and run off with Johnsy Hatfield. Maybe he was angry because the Hatfields crossed the Tug River to come over to Kentucky to get involved in Kentucky elections. However, the reason the Furies were loosened on a whiskey sudden day 100 years ago, one of McCoy's sons taunted an unarmed Ellison Hatfield. Now, I'm going to go on over some other things here in a second, but let's discuss that. One of the McCoys taunted an unarmed Ellison Hatfield. I see so many, or we see so many stories. Again, we've done almost a 900-page book over the last 50 years on the Hatfields and McCoys and the feud and different things. And one of the things that always comes up, of course, is the Ellison stabbing and shooting and all that. Over the years, people have forgotten. They leave out an important fact. They presume that this man, Ellison Hatfield, was totally innocent. Just three McCoy boys run up and started stabbing them and shooting them. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's just like Devil Anse. I told somebody the other day, I said, I swear I believe somebody could say that Devil Anse flew a Black Hawk helicopter during the Civil War, and people from West Virginia And his followers would say, yeah, I remember seeing that. I remember hearing that or reading it in a book. It's funny how you can do no wrong. Same way with Ellison. We'll show you a pig document later on where Ellison Hatfield was actually charged with stealing a pig before the 1878 pig trial of Floyd Hatfield. So it wasn't the first time that the West Virginia Hatfields were charged, and even Ellison was convicted of stealing the hog, 4 hogs in fact. And we've got court documents to back it up. It's no argument. You can't argue. Well, you can argue it. You can argue anything, but not with any justification, because we've got the documents that prove it. But what we're talking about there is Ellison Hatfield. Big old innocent Ellison Hatfield that got picked on by 3 McCoy boys, half his size, and stabbed and shot. But somewhere along the way, people forget to tell the real story of what really happened on that day on Blackberry Creek when this all took place. Now, there's a, let me read this one little bit here. The skirmish ended a century later. Outside interest. Actually, it's in this 1880s newspaper article. She's going to put that at the back.
Yeah.
It's real hard to read, but you can read it. A relative of both the Hatfields and McCoys was a candidate for office and came together to work for his election. Both factions, the Hatfields and McCoys, came together to work. Now, who they're talking about here that's running for public election is Preacher Ance Hatfield. He was the Justice of the Peace during the pig trial, and he's running for Justice of the Peace. He's running for re-election. And the Hatfields and the McCoys, which he was related to both, it says. Now, how was he related to both? Preacher Ance Hatfield was the minister of Randall and Sarah McCoy. He baptized both of them. But besides being their minister, Preacher Ance Hatfield's daughter, Nancy Hatfield, had married Randall McCoy's wife's brother's son, Asa. Uriah McCoy, his son Asa McCoy, had married Preacher Ance's daughter, Nancy. Now, I know I've told you this a million times, but Preacher Ance was my great-great-grandfather. Nancy, his daughter, Nancy Hatfield, is my great-grandmother. Her husband, Asa McCoy, was the son of Uriah McCoy. Those are my great-great-grandparents. Yep. And so they were there on election day to campaign and try to get Preacher Ance reelected as Justice of the Peace. Now, the story is, and it's not really, people's not really said that it didn't happen, but there was a problem with a fiddle. There was a problem with money owed to Tolbert McCoy by Bad Elias Hatfield. Now, Bad Elias, they didn't call him Elias, they called him Elias, Bad Elias. Bad Elias is the brother to Preacher Ance Hatfield. Bad Elias would have been my great-great-uncle. And Bad Elias and Tolbert McCoy got in an argument over $1.75 or $1 and some cents that Bad Elias owed Tolbert. Now, they had been drinking all day long. The moonshine had been passed. And I'm going to just skip over some of the newspaper articles. She's going to have it there. You can read the whole thing for yourself. But I'm not going to go verbatim. But basically what happened is Tolbert and Bad Elias finally got into a fist fight. Tolbert got the best of Bad Elias, and he whooped him. Now, this is where Mr. Innocent Ellison Hatfield, which was also known as Deacon Hatfield, he was said to got along with a lot of people and so forth like that too. But he had been drinking all day long also. Now don't forget, now Preacher Ants was sometimes called Deacon also, so the newspaper article could have got talking about Deacon or Preacher and been one and the same, but they're talking about Ellison here. After Tolbert McCoy whooped, what you might call whooped, Elias Hatfield, the story is, and it's in the newspaper, and it goes with what the family has said for years and years, the McCoy family. And what happened is, Bad Elias stood up and said, why don't you try that on me? Now the newspaper article says, why don't you try that on a man my size? And you can look at Ellison Hatfield over there in a minute beside of, which Preacher Ant, or Devil Ants wasn't but 5'6", but his other brother was I think 5'10" or something, so you can look at him. Ellison was a big boy. And he stood up and said, won't you try that on me? Well, between the moonshine and Hatfield McCoy pride, the fight was on. And they say that in the beginning that Tolbert was actually, after being through a fight like he had been through with Elias, that he was actually doing pretty good, holding his own against Ellison. Thank you, babe. I'm losing my train of thought because I'm wanting to go back to the newspaper article. In the newspaper article, it says that when Ellison challenged Tolbert McCoy, that he carried a large pocket knife. And his brother Elias, that's good Elias, that's Devil Ants's brother, and that he had a gun. That's the newspaper article, that Ellison Hatfield had a knife, and good Elias had a gun. And that when the fight started, Tolbert McCoy pulled his knife and was getting some pretty good stabs in on Ellison. And Ellison stabbed at Tolbert. Ellison's knife closed on his hand, and he threw the pocket knife down because it cut him worse than it did Tolbert. And finally he got threw Tolbert to the ground, had a large rock, and was hitting Tolbert with the rock. And that's when Wilm and Farmer stabbed him, and then finally shot Ellison Hatfield one time, not 7 times. And, you know, we've covered this story, I think, on another video. If we didn't, it'd be out in the future. But, again, going back to this story, imagine a bunch of Hatfields, West Virginia, Kentucky Hatfields, a bunch of McCoys, Kentucky or West Virginia, standing there and they're watching their brother get stabbed and shot. And you believe the fact that they're going to stab him anywhere from 27 times to 40 or 50 times, and they're not going to do something. We don't buy that. But there's a newspaper article that confirms, even though Time Life magazine says one of the McCoy sons taunted and unarmed Ellison Hatfield. Now, where do you get this unarmed at? Why was it even brought up? If he's unarmed, why would you say? You know, if nobody's claimed that he's armed, why would you put that topic in there, that wording? He taunted an unarmed Hatfield, Ellison Hatfield, one of the McCoy sons. It doesn't say the McCoy was unarmed or armed, but it does on Ellison, which makes you tend to go back to the original story of 1882 where they're talking about Ellison Hatfield pulling the first knife. Again, we're just going to skim over this, but this is Time magazine. I thought it was interesting. The skirmish ended with the sentry after at least 20, perhaps 100 men and women had died. They're talking about the Hatfield-McCoy feud. There was 12 people died during the Hatfield-McCoy feud. There's a sign back there that says America's bloodiest feud. And that's what it became known as. It didn't become known as the Hatfield-McCoy feud, the most people ever killed in a family feud. Because it wasn't. There was only 12 killed during that time. But it was America's bloodiest feud. It was overkill. Devil Ants and the West Virginia Hatfields were mean. They set fire to their houses. They shot them cold-blooded, stripped them down naked, tied them to trees and killed them. Shooting women and children. Beating old Sarah McCoy. It was brutal. And that's what it became known as America's bloodiest feud. Okay, pause
Just
it.
pause it right there.
All right, so we had to take a commercial break there. We had a gentleman come to the museum. Today's our first day open, and that was our first customer. And
Mr. Roger.
Rodney.
Rodney.
Yeah, and that was one of the nicest men that I've ever met in my life. And everybody knows I don't have the personality to say that if I don't mean it, but he was.
He was really nice. He was
He was
sweet.
a traveler. He travels all over. His wife had passed away, and he's just become what I always wanted to do when I retire and just travel the country. That's what he does. He's interested in the Hatfield McCoy feud, and had been
Saw
watching
us
some
on YouTube and then
videos. In fact, he was discussing some of the videos that we've even made videos on correcting, and he couldn't believe that what he'd been seeing is some of it's not correct from other videos, and we enlightened him. Anyway, it was real nice meeting them. We definitely enjoyed it. Now it's time to conclude this video. By now, of course, you understand that I've lost my train of thought from where we was probably at. I think the last thing we were talking about is America's bloodiest feud, and even though it wasn't the most people killed, it was the bloodiest. They had no mercy on nobody. In the Time magazine, there's a professor, Chuck Kinney, assistant professor of history, and it seems like, you know, all these people's got titles with their names that I guess more people pay attention to than relatives or people with the Hatfield or McCoy name, or both. And it's all in what you want to believe. But he talks in here in this Time magazine article where like he got it from Altina Waller, I'm sure, which said economic problems caused the problems with the feud. Once again, we have economic problems now. Everybody's had economic problems since the beginning of time. That doesn't make you go out and fight your neighbor. The timber and all that took place later on, in years later after the feud had started. This feud started over the Civil War, and if we don't never communicate nothing else to anybody out there, understand, you can say whatever you want. You can say it started over the pig, you say it started over the love affair, started over moonshine, started over anything you want. You can say anything you want. But I'm here to tell you, Sheila and I, that the Hatfield-McCoy feud, the hard feelings that started the Hatfield-McCoy feud was the Civil War. It was the start of the Civil War. It was Kentucky and West Virginia, Kentucky and Virginia at the time, been border states. It was Devil Anse Hatfield deserting in the heat of battle, him and some of his family members and friends.
Yeah.
And when they deserted, Randall and his group were either killed or taken prisoner of war. And then for Randall McCoy to find out when he was released as a prisoner of war that his brother Harmon had been killed by Devil Anse and Jim Vance. It made it, the Civil War was the hard feelings of the Hatfield-McCoy feud. Everything else was a contributing factor. None of that stuff helped any, that's for sure. But the beginning of it was the Civil War. Anyway, that's going to conclude this video. Thanks for joining us. Fred and Sheila McCoy, Hatfield McCoy Museum, Liberty, Kentucky. See you next time.
Please like and subscribe.
Please like and subscribe for Sheila, so to make her happy. She loves looking at those numbers going up. Thank you.